Hello everyone, and welcome to Galaxy 89 Cars. Now, I've shot quite a few real-world reviews on my channel. It's actually one of my most favourite videos to make. Usually I have a car for 1 or 2 days and I'm able to test the car in my local area or drive up to London, which is a good kind of 60-mile round trip, test it out on different road types. But I've never had a car long term. Now that's where today's video is going to be different, because I'm basically starting out on a 500-mile round trip. Now the car in question is the car behind me over here. It's the 2019 Lexus UX250h from Lexus Guildford that I filmed a few weeks ago. And I filmed a full in-depth tour on it, which can be found on my channel. I'll leave a link up here somewhere. If you want more detailed information about specs or about options, then please look at that video, because this will have some of that information, but it's really going to be more about, how usable is the car, is it intuitive to use, the kind of usability of it, etc. Now, that's the car. The journey is a 500-mile round trip, like I said, from basically the southeast of the UK, around London, which is where I'm based, all the way up to the kind of northwest of Wales. Now, I'm going to be going to an area known as Snowdonia National Park, because I'm going to climb Mount Snowdon for my birthday, which is actually coming up in a few days, but will be past a few days by the time this video goes out. It's a good test for the car and myself, so hopefully it's going to make quite a good video. Looking at this car in particular, I'll go through some basic information. So this is the UX250 hybrid. It's the brand new SUV to Lexus lineup. Now Lexus bring 3 SUVs, so you have this at the bottom, which is kind of their crossover right at the beginning. Above this you have the NX, and above that you have the RX and the RXL. Now this is the F Sport variant of the UX, and what can we kind of gauge from that, or what benefits do you get from the F Sport? So you get the exterior F Sport style pack, where you have sort of wider arch at the front and it's a bit more dynamic. You have 18-inch F Sport wheels, and you have more sort of dynamic rear as well, with the extended rear bumper. Now there are lots of different options inside that we're going to check out in a second, but first thing I want to do is really look at the boot. So obviously this is a long trip. I'm travelling on my own. I've still got 3 bags, so I've got my luggage, I've got my camera equipment, and I've got the bag I'm going to walk with. Now this isn't actually a very large boot. I couldn't find any official figures on the capacity of the boot, but as we can see, it's really not that big at all. And now under here, it can be extended a little tiny bit, but really not very much at all. Fortunately, it's got the power boot lid, which we can check out in a second. But if, for example, I'm getting my bag out and putting it back in, how easy is it to put the bag in? Well, because of the power boot lid, we can very easily open the boot even with one hand, and then putting that back in is very, very easy. Now shutting this, all we have to do is press here and close that. But looking at the boot, if it's a family of 4 going away, 2 adults and 2 children, I think potentially it's going to struggle with this car. Moving to the inside, because it's got keyless entry, we don't need to unlock the car, we can just walk in. It's a very nice interior space. They've taken the highlights, the interior highlights from the ES that I reviewed a few months ago, with the sort of new binnacle up here, better wheel, but more importantly this kind of area here has been improved greatly. And because this is the F Sport, we get the F Sport kind of sport performance seats with the red and the black leather. I'll comment on how they feel a little bit later. So to kind of set the car up, first of all, what we can do is turn the car on. So by depressing the brake pedal and then that button together, it brings the car on and we get these nice start-up screens. And that brings the seat forward to the last position, because this has the 3-stage memory controls as well. So to adjust the seats, if we want to do that, all of the controls are found down here where my hand is, and they're typical kind of seat shape, so we can adjust the back of the seat, the lumbar, the top, and also slide the seat forward and backwards very easily. It doesn't have quite the same problem, I think it was the ES that did, but your knee can kind of bash against that. It has a telescopic wheel, which is very easy to maneuver around using the button here, up, out and in and up and down, very easy. So that's that. The mirrors are also very easy to adjust. All we have to do is use the controls down here where we can go left or right, and then just the movement controls down here. So, all, you know, very typical. Oh, there we go. Take a little bit of time to adjust, but there you go. And on the outside of here, I don't know if you can see that. I might zoom in a little bit. Those little markers there. This car does have the blind spot assist package, which means if anything comes near the lateral aspect of the car, then those will flash and you'll kind of get a prompt. So that's it in terms of rear visibility. So if I can get a bit of a better view here, it's not too bad. The rear view mirror is easy to adjust, very easy, you know, very typical, yeah, it's got this kind of seamless edge that Lexus are doing at the moment. I actually quite like the aesthetic of it. The windscreen is actually kind of small, which is something I noticed as soon as I got in the car and I was driving it. It's quite a rectangular, slim piece of glass, and you're very, very aware of all of the things above you when you're driving. So it's going to be interesting to see if that impacts. But other than that, with the kind of large mirrors that always come with Lexus, I do feel that, you know, the visibility is good. Now, focusing on my drive today. So if we come to the map, like I said, I'm based just outside here, so that's pretty much near London. So I've got to drive from here all the way up to pretty much here. That's where Snowdonia is, and it should take about 5 hours. I'm going to do a couple stops in that time to talk about MPG and different things. And one thing, of course, I want to do is reset the MPG so we know on this trip how good the car is performing. But the first bit is going to be motorways, and I'll focus on that a bit later. So we have to press OK. So at the moment, like I said, 46.1, which is pretty good. The actual quoted estimate for this car is 49, around 50 MPG. So this is performing kind of as expected. Obviously been driven pretty well. It's done 1,576 miles. So we hold OK. There we go. So it's down to 0. So all MPG figures now are going to be based on this trip. And there's also a range of 235 miles, which probably won't get me based on current driving to my destination, but we will see. Anyway, what I think I'm going to do very quickly is go to my GoPro, talk about some of the real basic specs of the car, engine, performance, etc. And then I'm going to get on my drive. Like I said, this is a 2019 Lexus UX250 hybrid. As with all, pretty much all current Lexus models, bar a few, this is a self-charging hybrid. It's powered primarily from a front-mounted 2-litre 4-cylinder engine. There's also two AC synchronous motors at the front, and a nickel hydride battery. Nickel hydride instead of lithium ion, because in this kind of car you want a slower discharge of energy, and nickel hydride lasts longer, so that means servicing costs should also be lower, which is kind of what you want really. Total system output is around 180 brake horsepower. Now, this is, depending on the spec, this being an F Sport with a Takumi pack, it's pretty fully loaded, so we're probably looking at the top end of 16 to 1700 kilograms of weight. Now the power and weight combined, well, they result in a 0 to 62 or 100 km/h time of about 8.5 seconds and a top speed of just over 110 miles an hour, I think. It's going to be interesting to see how this car performs on the hilly roads of Wales. What I think I'll do is also talk a little bit about my actual trip to Wales. So why am I doing this? So believe it or not, in a couple of days, well, tomorrow actually, I'm turning 30. Now, instead of doing the usual thing of going out and getting drunk or having a meal, which is nothing wrong with, they're very good things to do, I thought I'd do something memorable. 20s were a big decade for me. I did a lot of stuff happened. And so I wanted to kind of, bridge 20s and 30s with something that's positive, and I'd have to maybe push myself a little bit, and, something that was, I don't know, just a bit different. So Mount Snowdon, which is the mountain I'm going to be walking, is the second highest peak in the UK. Now there are what's known as the 3 Peaks Challenge. This is the second one. You've got Scafell Pike in the UK, in England, which is the highest. Snowdon, which is the second highest. and then Ben Nevis in Scotland, which is the tallest of all. Snowdon, which I'm doing tomorrow, is about 1,058 metres, and the route I'm doing is Llanberis, or Llanberis, if that's the correct pronunciation in Welsh. The route is 15 kilometres round trip, so it's 7.5 kilometres up with a 900 and something metre elevation. So the projected time is probably going to be about 6-7 hours in total to do it. I've climbed quite a few mountains. I've gone up, I think the highest is just over 2,000 metres before. So this should be a nice experience. It's going to be really quite scenic, some stunning landscape I'm hoping for, and I'm going to include some shots from that and maybe a bit of voiceover, because I think it's going to be way too windy to actually film properly, but I'll include that in the vlog tomorrow. One other thing I wanted to touch on briefly is that the UX, depending on spec, isn't actually 4-wheel drive as standard. 4-wheel drive in the F Sport and the Takumi, because this comes in 4 spec options I think in the UK. It comes in the standard, it comes in the F Sport, and then it comes in the Takumi, so 3 main spec options. That you can basically make it a Takumi with a Takumi pack, maybe not the wheels and exterior styling, but the actual options. Anyway, it's not actually 4-wheel drive. I think it's called 4E or E4, and so the car standard is set up as a front-wheel drive car, but with this option you can have 4-wheel drive, and I'm not entirely sure if this actually has it. I'll have to look a bit more at the options and the specs, but it'd be interesting to see if there are any traction issues when I get to the kind of different terrain in Wales. So at the moment, just heading up from just outside London towards Oxford. Oxford service is a really popular place for people to stop off. What I'm going to do, get some refreshments, but I'm also going to reflect on how the fuel economy is doing as well. So what I think I'll do is I'll catch up with you when I stop at Oxford. I've just made my first stop, like I said, at the Oxford services. They're a pretty normal place to stop, just through there. It's a really busy car park as a result, but found a spot quite quickly, which I was quite relieved about. The car's quite relatively small, and it's pretty nimble and quite manoeuvrable. And when you put the car into reverse, you got the extended screen up here. I think it's like 10.25 inches, which is the optional screen. And all the parking systems come up. You've got the top-down view, the side views. I think I'll actually show those. But one thing I wanted to show before was the MPG. So parking was very easy. So if we put the car back on again, so this is after probably about, I'm not sure, 50 miles or so, something like that, maybe less. I've managed to get up to 62.7 mpg. Now that's of course all motorway driving, so I'm positive it's going to go down from that. But that's not bad at all. Now in terms of the reversing stuff, here if we just put that in and then we go to R, we can see here it's going to beep now, unfortunately, but we've got the top-down camera and we've got this bit here as well. So I've been driving for a few more hours and I'm actually pretty deep inside Wales now. I couldn't find another nice place to kind of film kind of as this really. We've got a pretty amazing waterfall up there if you can see it. And yeah, this area of Wales, I mean most of Wales is absolutely stunning, but it's pretty hard to beat where we are now. I'm pretty sure we're inside Snowdon National Park now, heading towards Llanberis, or Llanberis, how you pronounce it in Welsh. I probably murdered it there. Near an area called the Cromlech or the Cromlech boulders, and I'm sure you can see why, because there are these huge boulders everywhere. And this is a main area for slate mining, and also now for mountaineering and rock climbing. You can kind of see why. It's a really great area for it. But if we focus on the car, actually before, I'm going to show you this really nice river flowing over here. Yeah, it's a pretty special area, Wales. Really nice. You can see why Evo and other car magazines come here to test the cars out. So if we take a quick go inside here, yeah, the mileage has now gone up to 1,800 miles. Get that start screen we're familiar with. So the MPG before, if I remember correctly, was around 62.7, around 63. It's gone down to 57.4. Because the roads are so good here, I was able to kind of put the car into sport mode, which you can do using this here, just that Sport and then Sport Plus. I put it into Sport Plus and have the same kind of dial as the LC500 and also as the LFA. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later in the video, but you know, I have been critical of these kind of cars having different driving modes like that, but you can actually begin to enjoy the sense. It's not just a utilitarian car kind of, you know, for certain people to, you know, put shopping in or do certain chores. You can actually begin to start enjoy driving with this. I'll go into it a bit more of my reflection later in the video. But yeah, that means that the MPG has been hit a bit, but not a huge amount. To be able to enjoy driving and still get 57.4 MPG is pretty good. Other than that, I'm pretty much finished with this portion of the video because I need to go get to my hotel and sort myself out. Like I said, I'm probably going to do a few bits tomorrow, but really all the reflections are going to come from, well, they're going to come at the end of the video. Or towards the end of the video. So yeah, I will join you again tomorrow and I'll add some clips and some different bits from when I'm actually walking up Mount Snowdon itself. The next day, I started my walk at around 9:30 AM, and as you can see, I was very fortunate with the weather. As I've already mentioned, I decided to take the Llanberis path, which is one of about 4 paths, and starts off at pretty much 45 degrees on tarmac, before changing to a rock and dirt track, but with great views right from the start. Parallel to this part of the trail is a single train track that is used by people who prefer the comfort of an old carriage pushed by a steam train to the rugged and steep walk itself. This train track switches from right to left as you ascend, and you need to walk under 2 railway bridges. After the aptly named halfway house, the walk becomes more rocky and steep until we reach yet another railway bridge and get our first view across the other side of the mountains. At the end of this section, I became acquainted with the clouds as I was on the final push to the summit. Around 3 hours after setting off, I reached the summit at 1,058 metres. This summit marker also points to different locations. Considering what we've already seen, it's no surprise that the summit provides equally impressive views, and I urge you all to give the walk a go if you haven't already. Now you join me back in the car at the very end of my trip and my time with the Lexus. I left this morning at about 8:30 AM. It's now pretty much 12 hours after that. It didn't take me the entire time to drive back. I made a couple stops along the way. One was along the coast, because it's actually, from where I was, it kind of runs up, and then going back down to London, it can be quite an easy route to get back that way, and it's also very picturesque. And in a clip that I'll show in this part of the video, you'll actually see what I mean as well. Wales is an astonishing place. I think a lot of people think it's renowned and famous for other things, but it is so incredibly picturesque and beautiful and scenic, and it's well worth going if you've never been before. So basically what I wanted to do now is kind of round up the video, round up my time with the UX, and kind of share some things that I've noticed and found after running pretty much 500 miles in a few days with it. The first thing I want to talk about is how efficient the car was. Now, like I said, in the time I've had the car, I've done around 486 to 500 miles in it, but 2 really, really long stints. So one was going, and then the other one was coming back, like 5 hours each. So that cost me to do that and still have 60 miles on the clock of range. That cost me about £60. I can't remember how many litres that was in total. It's probably not far off, 40 or 50 litres. The fuel tank of this car, I think it's around 45 litres. The final MPG, if I just start the car up really quickly, I'll go forward. So after starting the car up, the final MPG is 59.1. So going, if you remember on the first day, before I reset the MPG, it was around 45 or something. So that must have been really quite hard running in Sport Plus, in town kind of commuting. After I reset it, if you remember at the beginning of the video, and then when I got to Wales on my trip up, halfway, let's say, I managed to get it to 62 point something mpg, and that was at the time where I just I put some more fuel in just before the border with Wales, 62 mpg, and that entire time I was running in eco mode. Then as soon as I got into Wales, that's basically flat all motorway driving. As soon as I got into Wales, it's renowned for being having significant amount of valleys, being very hilly. So the car, I'm having to use more throttle. I also put the car into Sport Plus, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So the fuel efficiency went down to 57 point something mpg, which I think I showed. And now it's back up to 59 after doing that and running on the motorway for a bit. So it's a high 50s, low 60s, over 500 miles, and that's motorways, countryside roads, hills, inner city driving, having to commute through here, stop-start motorway traffic. It wasn't, straight through. So that's pretty good, really. I'm not sure how that would be outweighed. I'm not sure because to have a hybrid or electric powertrain, you need to refine more, basically, materials. So I'm not sure what the offset would be for that, for actually like creating the car, a hybrid powertrain for this car, and then how many miles you would have to drive to be able to offset that, the sort of carbon footprint of that. I have no idea, but for a car of this size, 1700 kilograms, small crossover SUV getting 60 mpg, it's still pretty good. And then going into the actual engine itself, it's only a 4-cylinder 2-litre engine, and it doesn't have a special exhaust system on it. There's not that kind of car, so it doesn't have an inspiring sound or anything like that. You do hear it kick in when you really put your foot down. It just has a standard kind of engine sound. It does seem to rev quite high. You are very aware of it revving quite high when you're sort of trying to push on a bit, even with hard accelerating. So, if you're on a slip road going down onto the motorway, or you're trying to join a fast road, basically from near a standstill, you really hear the engine going. Like I said in other Lexus videos, I'm not sure if that's because you're just so used to it being very quiet, because most of the time it is very, very quiet. And really the only thing you get is a bit of wind noise coming from the mirrors, and obviously road noise as well. To talk more about torque, I think last I talk about acceleration a bit more as well. In Eco, because obviously the car has different driving modes, Eco, Normal, Sport and Sport Plus, especially because this is an F Sport model. And they do affect the sort of hardness of the steering feel, the throttle response. I think this car has adaptive dampers, so it will affect that as well. So it does affect the car to some degree. Now in Eco mode, that's where I got the highest efficiency. All of the pedals have kind of a very kind of spongy feel to them. There's a little bit of travel in each pedal before anything really gets going. It's sort of subdued in a way, and almost right at the beginning of when you're sort of taking off in Eco, it's almost a kind of little bit lethargic. The car feels maybe a little bit heavy. That's just my opinion, of course. When you're actually already at speed on the motorway, it's very easy to just maneuver past people. And if you're already at speed, the car builds acceleration very well, holds its speed very well. So that's not an issue, it's just right at the beginning. But like I said, that's in Eco. In Sport Plus, that does change a bit. Now, I think I've said earlier in the video that putting this car into Sport Plus and kind of firming everything up enabled me to actually start enjoying driving, because the roads in Wales are absolutely incredible. Evo, Autocar, Auto Express, all of the big car journalistic companies test their cars there for that reason. I wanted to go there and I was interested how the car was going to feel. With Sport Plus on, the car handles inclines very, very well. I think it has more enough torque for what it is. And this is not a sports car after all. It's the F Sport, sportier version of a crossover SUV from a luxury brand. It's not meant to be a sports car, but it did feel good. There was actually quite a nice amount. There was a good level of chassis control. There wasn't a huge amount of roll or pitch or yawing or anything like that. It was quite stable. It felt stable. You didn't feel like because in some cars you really feel like you're tilting when you're turning if you're on a fast corner, but this was very, very level. I was very impressed with it. Yeah, the acceleration feel was good through the throttle. The steering, pretty accurate and direct. So, you know, it sort of inspired confidence. The brake pedal in all driving modes, I don't think it changes necessarily. Like I said, there was a bit of travel in it. So if you're traveling at speed, you depress the pedal, and it might have something to do with the regenerative braking system, because obviously this car, you know, helps to regenerate charge by braking. But it has a bit of travel, so you depress it maybe just over a centimetre and nothing really happens. You have to really kind of push the pedal down for anything to happen, and then you brake totally fine for the car, so there's no sort of worries with that. I'm looking down here because I made some notes on my phone. It's been an incredibly long day and I'm not sure if I could remember everything. So with tech and assistance, and we go on to visibility as well, one thing that I have noticed is that this has actually quite a small windscreen. You notice that as soon as you come in, I think I mentioned it earlier in the video, you notice this part very much, and it's rectangular. Most kind of windscreens kind of jut out at the side. It's quite small. At least it feels quite small. It's outward visibility. It doesn't necessarily feel compromised, but you feel like it's a small space to look through. The wing mirrors are smaller than I've had on other Lexus models, but they're good enough. These pillars do create pretty severe blind spots, and looking back just like that, you only have a small part of the rear window right at the rear of the rear window. So like anything back from here you cannot see. However, onto the assistance stuff, the blind spot, or the blind spot management system, highlights things along the side of the car in the wing mirrors with a little icon. I found that really useful because sometimes I was manoeuvring on the motorway and I check my blind spot, check my mirrors, can't see anything, but then I can see in the blind spot monitor that it's flashing, so something's obviously there, and it kind of pushed me to sort of double take, maybe slow down a bit or speed up a little bit, just so I could, alter my visibility slightly. So I think that actually genuinely helps. The only other assistance thing that I encountered was lane tracking assist. It can be quite intrusive, in all honesty. It really does push the wheel over. It vibrates the wheel first, and then it really does kind of push the wheel a little bit, so you're more on track, 'cause it's obviously keeping track of the lines. That is helpful sometimes and helpful not. If you're crossing over lines on purpose, and obviously doing it legally, because maybe you're manoeuvring off of a motorway, for example, the wheel is shuddering or it's trying to turn, you can obviously turn all this stuff off, but I wanted it on just to see what it was like. It can be helpful in other situations, because obviously maybe you're checking your blind spot and the road curves and you haven't taken into account how much the road is curving, so it gives you a helpful reminder to think, okay, I need to bring my attention back to the front. In terms of the comfort, both in terms of the ride and inside the car, it has quite a firm ride. Obviously it's got the McPherson struts up front and the trailing arm double wishbones at the rear. So I think they will obviously contribute to it being quite firm. I think they contribute largely to the car having a good level of body control. But the dampers do soften off quite nicely. This being the F Sport has the F Sport seats, and they look really good. I'll probably overlay something over this. They look really good. At first they're comfortable, but they are quite firm in the middle. So this part here, this kind of red part, you do feel this seam on either side in the middle here. And after 5.5 hours of sitting in them, you do start to feel a little bit uncomfortable. I think you would feel uncomfortable pretty much anything. Lexus seats are usually absolutely superb, and I've loved them in everything apart from this and the ES. These are probably better than the seats in the ES, because that was just the basic one, but they're still not quite as good as other Lexus seats I've tried. The aesthetic is very good, but I think maybe somehow that's compromised the feel. And also the headrest for me feels a little bit awkward. I couldn't get the seat set up just as I'd want it to be. In terms of driving, so the wheel is very comfortable. It's padded very nicely. It's a very nice thing to hold. Every Lexus wheel I've held has been very, very nice. The door arm, in case you're, just driving with one arm and you've got your arm resting, it's got a nice level of padding. It's very, very comfortable. Sometimes what can happen if you're driving long distances is that you can have your arm to the side and you get a pain in your elbow or something. This, not a problem. Exactly the same with the central column. In terms of the infotainment system, I think they're making improvements. The aesthetic of it and the central column and all of this is significantly better. But what they're doing in the central column is you have a control by your hand. So it's not all just with the trackpad or direct select buttons around it. At the end of the armrest or the cover or the lid for the central storage area, you have an array of buttons, and some of them are push and some of them you have to scroll. So it takes a little bit of getting used to, in all honesty, but you learn pretty quickly and then you begin to navigate around it. The touchpad and the way you navigate around the infotainment system, still a little bit awkward. A lot of people have said they really like it. I personally still think it's a little bit awkward. The snap feature can be good, so if you're scrolling around and there are options below, for example, it will snap to it, and then you can easily just push to the side. That can be a bit awkward to move up and across, for example. But other than that, it works fine. You can put destinations in okay, you can search for radio stations okay, you can pair your phone totally fine. And in terms of the sat-nav, you can scroll around manually, or you can use the trackpad and pinch or spread to zoom in and out. So that's good. This car has the optional, I think it's 12 or 13 speaker Mark Levinson system. On the motorway, it does get drowned out. That's what I found over the last few days. Even with the volume fairly high, it does feel quite drowned out. You can't hear it totally fine. When the car's stationary or driving at slow speed, so you're just driving through town, the sound system is really, really good, really crisp, nice levels, really good. But like I said, on the motorway, it's a bit drowned out. Now going back to the driving modes quickly, although I've been very critical of this type of car having driving modes in the past, I quite like it in this because it's a small, compact, sort of bit more of a fun car, I think. Compact SUV at least. And, it doesn't necessarily change its personality entirely, and it's not meant to be a sports car. But what I found, in other models, Lexus models, is it just enhances the car's personality a bit, so it firms it up, makes it more responsive. So if you do want to have a little bit more fun or try to make, more of certain driving conditions, you can do that. It changes it enough to do that, but it doesn't make it a sports car. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's a little bit different, especially with the little vloggy bits and as well of me going up Snowdon. If you have any feedback about the car or want to learn any more, Lexus Guildford will be able to help with that. All of their contact details are in the description of the video. Please subscribe for the latest content, and until next time, thank you for watching.